Hello and welcome to Cinema Subculture, where we discuss everything strange, obscure, and downright messed up in the world of movies. My name's Gary.
And I'm Simon. So, Gary, what film would we call this? A film? Rip-off film? What film are we here to chat about this evening?
Supermen Donuyor is a 1979 film directed by Kunt Tulgar. After seeing Richard Donner's 1978 version of Superman, Tulgar attempted his own version, displaying the tropes of the subgenre of Turksploitation, remakes of Hollywood hits, which went as far as to reuse original music, costume, and shots with little regard for copyright infringement. So is Turkish Superman worth our time today, and is it worth watching for exploitation fans?
Okay, so how did you come across this? Let's get down to it.
Right. I've only recently heard of the subgenre of Turksploitation. Basically just a guy on YouTube talking about movies, and he mentioned the Turkish I Spit in Your Grave,
Right.
which led me down the kind of rabbit hole of finding out there's a whole hundreds of these films. Apparently in the sort of 1780s, the Turkish film industry was making like 300 films a year.
Right.
Just churning them out super quickly. Then I discovered there was all of these superhero movies, Star Wars, Star Trek. So I thought, let's have a watch.
Let's
see what they're all about.
It is something that I was kind of aware of. I'd seen a lot of clips from things, and I knew about the Turkish Star Wars, for example. I'd seen that in some compilation videos that I'd seen on YouTube. I didn't realise it was quite as prolific as that, to be honest with you. And I don't think I'd ever heard of the Superman, Turkish Superman. It was quite interesting when you mentioned let's watch them and stuff. So what do you think of this film?
Right. So I think part of the problem with this film is it's not quite as crazy as I expected or I was looking for. I think why this film fails as the kind of joyous trash that I was looking for is it's almost too good in a way. It sort of swings between the sort of two poles. There's moments where that are sort of holy shit moments. I can't believe that's on screen. So the most obvious ones would be the flying scenes and the Christmas baubles for space. But then I think the bulk of the movie is reasonably well acted. I didn't really have a problem with it. It didn't have the kind of, it felt it's the narrative is very traditional, very nuts and bolts. It didn't have. It felt like it knew where it was going. Basically, it's just a traditional. The superhero story is so well told, isn't it? It's it's basically just carbon copy stuff. It wasn't like an exploitation film that was just made up on the cuff, like Island of Death or something. It's like this is totally original. We have no idea where this is going. And I think the performances were pretty good overall. The dialogue was fine. I think one thing with foreign exploitation as well, when it's dubbed, it always gives it a more of a fun vibe. There's a sort of language thing that makes it, there's a disconnection that makes it more amusing. When it's in the original language, it always seems more professional. So maybe a dub of this would be different. I enjoyed it enough. I think it's, if it was more chaotic narratively, it might have been kind of more enjoyable in a way, in a perverse way. But it wasn't. It was too good for its own good. Essentially, I think that's the moral there.
I mean, I kind of get where you're coming from. I wouldn't have quite put it that way, that it was too good for its own good. But I think you're right in what you're saying. It's definitely not crazy enough, or like it didn't. It wasn't the fun, crazy experience I was expecting it to be. The production value is obviously rock bottom for most of it. The opening I found, once we get past the Christmas baubles, even right, because I could kind of go with that, and then looked like it had been hand drawn and coloured in a Superman symbol for the titles and stuff. The titles were super long. Like, I know the Donner film has long title, credit sequence at the beginning, but it's doing something interesting at least.
Right.
This was pretty laborious, but once we get into it and we meet is it Typhon, or Clark Kent, alternate here. That whole scene was very, I don't know, looked really like they're all look low budget, right? But like, this looked really low budget. I don't know. There was something about those first couple of scenes with his mum and his dad. It was just really rocky for me. But I think once we get into once he leaves home and gets to meets the Jor-El character, and then we get into the city and suddenly he's just working for the newspaper. Yeah, I think that the acting is, and mostly the film kind of holds up for what it's doing there, and is pretty well made, all things considered. But yeah, I don't know. I found it a bit kind of boring, to be honest with you. I that way I didn't find it, like, you think like some of it felt a bit soap opera-y, but not in, again, even that, like, that can tend to be like kind of a little arch in the acting sometimes, especially like when you're watching. I think the dub thing would have definitely helped it, like, if it was dubbed for that kind of thing. But I didn't feel there was enough kind of interesting stuff there. But like what they did with what they had was interesting enough. I don't know. The story was a bit all over the place. Like he, his mum says there's this rock that came with you from Krypton, and it'll take your powers away, so don't give it to anybody.
Right, yeah.
And then next scene, there's a guy coming off a plane. Who found this rock? It's like, okay, like, I don't know, like, the logical might have been that someone was trying to get the rock from Superman to do the thing, like, rather than just having their own rock that then they were trying to then replicate. So it was like 3 steps remote. I don't know. That just seemed a bit weird to me. But yeah, I don't know. It didn't really hold my attention very well, which sucked, because I was kind of like hoping, as I say, for a bit more, something a bit more manic. Like, even so, they mentioned some of the stuff I was looking about. I think you sent me a link to some info about the film as well. That it was kind of, rather than being fully based on Donner's Superman, which you see here, it's kind of based on like an old serial, the Captain Marvel character, the DC's Captain Marvel, now called Shazam in the comics. But and even when you see clips from that, and when you think of those types of serials, the Batman Robin serials, the Superman serials, they were quite fun and kind of energetic and kind of, I guess a little bit cartoony. But here, I don't know. I think it's maybe the main character, the main actor. Like, he's quite like dead faced almost.
Right.
Like, I wasn't kind of like, even when he reveals himself to be Superman to the Lois Lane character, it was kind of like, oh, right,
yeah,
cool. But yeah, anyway, sorry, we'll get into the plot in a second. But that, I don't know, it just felt a little bit bland for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we should say as well, though. I think one thing that makes it hard to judge how good the film is like the print quality, because we're watching this on YouTube. So I would guess the film was shot in 16mm, but the actual print that's available is like completely blown out. Contrast is gone. It's like, so it looks pretty shit. So then you probably need to see it in, like, if you saw it on a really good, like a nice restored print, it makes it look shittier, the fact that it's a bad version, I think, as well.
But I don't know. It's hard to say, obviously, again, for the same reason about the audio, the music cues that they left from the Donner film. They're all kind of some sped up, some are quite fluttery and stuff like that. I don't know how much that is them just working with like maybe a second, third, fourth generation source for for those audio cues. So that kind of I liked that, though. That was almost like a part that I was kind of like, when they started using like the kind of romance theme from Superman the movie, or like when he's going to find the Fortress of Solitude type place. They're using it, and it's quite, like, because that's quite a dramatic bit in the film musically, and they're using it, and it sounds so like cheap and nasty version of the score. Like, you know what I mean? It was kind of I kind of like that. That was kind of fun for me because you're like, oh, that's the music cue. They've done something to it. I think sped it up or changed the pitch just to kind of either hide it or just change it a little bit. But so I thought that was kind of interesting. But you're right, it's hard to judge. But I think the acting from the other characters felt very like in the kind of like realm of soap opera, right? Like that's something you would see. But I don't know, the main character, who I think was even an actor.
Right, yeah, he'd never acted before. I think his name is Hasim Tamirkoglu.
Right.
Apologies for the pronunciation. And he was changed his name to Typhoon. He was known as Typhoon. Then they just used that as Clark Kent's name, is it? So he basically he was chosen for his physique. As I understand it, he was a friend of the director. But I thought I came across this quote from the director, Kunt Tulgar. It said, our Superman was a little shy, not exactly the type for action films. He didn't want to play in dangerous scenes, so we had to find different ways. So that explains the kind of the action scenes, which are quite amusing, but very lacking in dynamic camera moves or anything to kind of distinguish them to make them kind of exciting or fun. They're not even edited. There's nothing exciting happening in them. They're not edited excitingly, or there's no interesting camera movement. They didn't seem to have much camera movement at all through the whole film.
No,
didn't seem to have the ability to dolly or track. There was I think maybe a tracking shot in a car that they filmed from another car. But it's mostly static setups, I think, which did make the film feel a bit more laboured and slow, I think. But I think I find the Hasim, the Typhoon character, he's got a likeable presence, even though he's not a great actor. So that kind of saw me through a wee bit with that guy. But the sort of lack of cinematic dynamism, I think, is one of the problems that the film's got as well, which we'd kind of expect on this size of budget. But that's one of the major problems, I think. But the John Williams, I think the music actually is like a canny move, because that actually gives it a kind of grandeur, and I think, it makes it feel like better, like an actual good piece of work. Like, this is quite good.
No, I'd agree with that. It's an interesting one. It is, and they do. You know, there's quite a lot of kind of set pieces they do through the film, like the train, for example, that like is not very well executed, I don't think, but I think it kind of gets the idea across. As I say, it is a little bit disappointing that those don't feel like, you know, that way. Like, you look at the stuff, the maybe the 40s or whatever, they, you know, doing these serials, and what they kind of managed to do in those, even with like stock footage, you know, like things like that. It felt like they weren't even able to get that, which was a bit of a shame,
right?
Because you know, it may have been quite cool to see this film with that kind of still, you know, outdated like production value, but like something a bit more dynamic, as you were saying, like, you know, where they can kind of almost, you know, if not make you believe a man can fly like they did in 1979 with Dawn of Superman. 79 was that when it was?
78, I said.
78. If not do that, at least make you think, like, you know, one of the serials, like, okay, yeah, he's kind of flying. But the Barbie flying Superman is or Ken, whatever.
Aye.
I honestly wonder what they were doing initially, because you know, as you say, YouTube was a bit kind of dodge, and I'm like, why does he have his head down like that when he's flying? That's a bit weird. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, okay,
yeah,
it's a doll.
So that was quite cool. They made their own rear projection system, homemade rear projection, and just tissue paper, I think, with projected scenes from Istanbul or Turkey, and then the Kens all flying in front. Yeah.
It's all right. As I say, I'm interested to see what else the kind of subgenre or the sub kind of a thing produces, because as I say, I was hoping for something a bit wilder.
Yeah. It does have that quality of the old serial vibe. I think you're right. It feels more akin to that, or like a TV movie or something, rather than like the more cinematic superhero films.
Is there anything in the plot that kind of stood out to you as kind of?
I mean, I'm not as well versed in superhero films as you. To me, this just felt like any random superhero movie. It didn't feel like anything worse. I felt like I'd been watching any superhero movie released in the last wee while. In terms of actual plotting, I mean, it was a wee bit repetitive. It just seemed like mostly when we get captured, Superman becoming freer, and then you get captured straight away again. But I feel like I don't know. That's just generic superhero fear to me. Superhero fights the bad guys. A little bit of plotting. Superhero fights the bad guys again. To me, that's pretty tropey. The standard fear.
No, you're right.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you're fair enough there when you think about it. If you take away the, obviously, if you take away the production value, but there's not. I don't know what you'd be left with. If you take away that from it and substitute it in with the current production value for superhero films, I think I think you're right. Plot wise, I mean the bad guy's plan is to use essentially kryptonite against. Well, he's not trying to use it against Superman necessarily. That's maybe a bit weird. No, turn the metal into gold. That feels quite classic. Maybe not a modern plot. I thought it was interesting when they were like bringing in the cat. Right. I was like, holy shit. I was like, well, that's hardcore. Let's see what it does to a cat. It's like, you said it could turn any metal into gold and you used a pen.
Right.
So, and you're straight to cat. that maybe stood out a little bit. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that the rest of it's kind of standard fare for superhero films. I don't think that there's too much there.
I think if you could take any random superhero film, and if you were doing it on a budget this small, this is what you would get, kind of.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, you see it just now on YouTube, for example. People do these recreations of films,
right,
with like shoestring budgets, and they're using like kind of miniatures and stuff. Like they did some really faithful recreations of scenes from movies, but like using like toilet roll holders and that type of stuff. Like, and you're right. So I think you would probably find that this would be what you would get. I had a bit of a difficult time deciphering like the character of I kept like kind of mixing up the character of her of the girl's father, who was the professor,
right,
and the bad guy who I think was his friend, but then,
they were in some kind of friend group or business partnership or something.
That I found that a wee bit kind of hard to follow, because I was like, when he turned around, I was waiting for her going, Dad, and I was like, and she was like, you, and he's like, yes, are you surprised? So, but yeah, no, that's fair. That's a fair comment, I think. Which is probably again why it's maybe a little bit disappointing in the fact that like you would maybe hope there would be something a little bit wilder, but
yeah. Especially some of the things, the bizarre use of the James Bond theme at one point.
Oh yeah, that was random as well. Yeah, you're right. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, which is like so out there, but it's like the rest of the film is kind of why you're not doing something crazier in this section of the film, which would have ultimately been better, I think. But these random crazy bits, but just not quite enough of them. I think is the takeaway from it. So overall, I think I find it quite charming in a way. But again, almost a bit too well done, a bit too pedestrian for its own good. If it had been worse, if it had been made more poorly, then I think it might have been like more noteworthy and one that you might think of more highly in the kind of world of crazy cinema. But interesting wee film.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I wish they'd taken more liberties with the story. Like, I know it's not the Donner film story they've kind of cribbed from, but it definitely, I feel like they could have took some left and right turns that would have kept it kept us on our toes a little bit watching it. Maybe like, I don't know, a dance break. I don't know, something they could have taken it in a different direction. But yeah, it was all right.
So you've been listening to Cinema Subculture. If you'd like more of this content, please make sure you have subscribed on YouTube, like the video, and hit the notification bell.
So thanks for listening. I've been Simon.
I've been Gary.
Keep it extreme.
It was a nightmare.